In June 1973, the Johnson Sea Link dives to explore a sunken World War II destroyer. Instead of discovery, it finds disaster, snared in wreckage with no way out. As the submersible hangs helpless below, its life support systems begin to fail, oxygen dwindles, and above, rescuers race against time to save a crew running out of breath. In the deep ocean, curiosity comes at a price measured in oxygen, pressure, and time. These crews learn that price the hard way. Every failure writes a new rule. Every loss forces innovation. And for filmmaker James Cameron, those hard lessons are tested at the very edge of human endurance at the deepest point on Earth.
The ocean is a very, very unforgiving environment. So it took us 7 years to build this. But I call it healthy paranoia. What can go wrong? And I'm a screenwriter. I could create lots of nasty scenarios in my mind, and then we engineer against those.
At 05:15 on the 26th of March 2012, the Western Pacific Ocean is calm. A bright green submersible, no larger than a delivery van, bobs in the swell. Strapped inside its heart is a man, his body folded into a steel sphere just 1 meter wide. He can't stand, he can't stretch, he can barely move. James Cameron is on a mission to dive to the deepest place on Earth, Challenger Deep at the bottom of the Mariana Trench, 10,908 meters beneath the surface, or 7 miles below the waterline, where no human has ever gone alone. The vessel he's in is the Deep Sea Challenger. Every second of his descent presses down with unimaginable weight, over 1,000 times the pressure of the atmosphere at sea level. Every life support system inside must perform flawlessly. Inside the cockpit, Cameron's life depends on 5 things: the quality of the limited supply of air he breathes, the strength of the steel sphere around him, the delicate balance of buoyancy that stops him from plummeting to the ocean floor and lets him rise again, the navigation and communication systems that link him to the world above, and if all else fails, the readiness of a rescue force to find him before the clock runs out. This story is about those 5 systems. It's about what they do, how they protect life in the abyss, the ocean's deepest levels, below 6,000 meters, and what happens when they go wrong. To understand their importance, we follow Cameron's descent into the trench. But alongside his success, 3 other stories shadow his journey: Johnson Sea Link, Pisces 3, and Titan. Each a reminder of how failure in the deep is merciless. Inside Deep Sea Challenger, there's no room for error and no room for air to escape. The 2.5-inch thick cockpit sphere is sealed, its steel walls pressing against the void. Cameron sits surrounded by gauges and digital readouts, every one of them tracking the atmosphere he breathes. The space is just 1 meter across. To move, he has to bend his knees into his chest, arms pressed against the equipment panels. There's no standing, no walking. This capsule is both prison and sanctuary. The air inside must be manufactured and maintained with scientific precision. At sea level, every breath you take has 21% oxygen. In his sealed bubble during a dive, the pressure could force oxygen levels dangerously high or dangerously low. To survive, Cameron relies on oxygen tanks that feed the cabin in carefully controlled doses. Cartridges of lithium hydroxide scrub the carbon dioxide he exhales. Without them, CO2 levels would creep upward, silently turning the air poisonous. The danger isn't obvious. Carbon dioxide doesn't drown you. It builds invisibly: headaches, confusion, and unconsciousness. In a sealed chamber, it kills before you even realize it. Cameron knows this well. Just 5 weeks earlier, on the 21st of February 2012, Deep Sea Challenger suffered a setback. During a test dive in Sydney Harbour, the atmosphere control system malfunctioned. Readouts showed unstable oxygen levels. Without certainty of safe air, the dive was aborted. Even in shallow water, the situation can spiral quickly. The risk of failure is well documented. Decades earlier, on the 17th of June 1973, off Key West, Florida, The research submersible Johnson Sea Link had 4 men on board. Their mission was a routine collection of sea life on a wreck at 110 meters. But at 0900, the vessel became entangled in the wreckage of a Navy destroyer. The submersible was trapped with its 4-man crew. At first, they wait. Rescue will come, but inside, the atmosphere begins to change. 2 men are in a metal dive compartment at the rear and 2 in the acrylic pilot's compartment. Carbon dioxide levels climb rapidly in both compartments, but the CO2 scrubber system falters in the cold metal chamber. By the second hour, headaches set in. Breathing grows faster, but the more they exhale, the more the poison builds. Robert Menzies, the pilot, improvises. He tears open a canister of beryllium chemical granules which absorb CO2 and pours them into his shirt. He holds the bundle in front of a fan to force the chemical to absorb more CO2. Beryllium is a mixture of calcium and barium hydroxide. It's slightly less effective than the lithium hydroxide used in the Deep-Sea Challenger, and its efficiency drops significantly at low temperatures. Since the aluminium dive compartment conducts heat away quicker than the acrylic, the cool waters at 110 meters drop the dive compartment temperature to as low as 7 degrees Celsius. Hours pass. Rescuers respond, but the rescue equipment they need is not on hand, and when it arrives, it still takes time to reach them. After 24 hours, the 2 researchers in the dive compartment, Edward Clayton Link and Albert Dennison Stover, collapse, their bodies overwhelmed by carbon dioxide poisoning. Only 2 of the crew survive in the pilot's compartment. In Deep-Sea Challenger, Cameron survives because his oxygen supply is stable and his scrubbers function flawlessly for 7 hours. In Johnson Sea Link, a failed scrubber turned the cabin into a sealed gas chamber. At 7:45 on the 26th of March 2012, Cameron is more than 8,000 meters below the surface. The hull is under 800 atmospheres of pressure. Under this pressure, a crack the width of a human hair could be enough to shatter the pilot's sphere instantly. The difference between life and implosion lies in the integrity of the steel around him. At 8,000 meters, Deep-Sea Challenger is deeper than any manned submersible since 1960. Through the viewport, there's nothing but black. No light reaches this depth. The only sound is the low hum of pumps and the faint creak of steel under stress. For Cameron's body, folded tightly in the cramped cockpit, that means 10,000 tons pressing against the pressure hull. If the sphere fails, there's no warning, no chance of escape. The implosion would be instant. The cabin would collapse in a fraction of a second, crushing his body before his brain can register. The pilot sphere, forged from specially treated steel, is designed for this. Its perfect sphere distributes the pressure equally in every direction. The engineers who built it tested it in the world's largest pressure tanks on land, pushing it beyond the crushing weight of the Mariana Trench. But inside, Cameron is acutely aware of what's at stake.
The whole sub actually squeezes down almost 3 inches in length when it gets to the bottom of the ocean, just because of the pressure. And the sphere that I'm in actually shrinks. The window that I look out actually pushes in toward me under 16,000 pounds per square inch of pressure.
At 0800, a hydraulic system begins to leak. Fluid sprays across his viewport. A manipulator arm seizes frozen, and the science sample collection door sticks. The leak is contained, but it forces a decision to cut short his bottom time. The vehicle structure is holding, but the systems under extreme pressure are never safe. They're only stable until they're not. A submersible isn't actually a submarine. There's no escape route, there's no reserve chamber. There's only the pressure hull. Its structural safety must be absolute, or it implodes. Spheres are the strongest shape. Flat surfaces bend and fail under pressure, but spheres distribute force evenly. Steel and titanium are trusted metals. Each weld and joint is X-rayed for flaws. A void the size of a grain of sand could propagate into catastrophic failure under pressure. Every hull is pressure tested in a hyperbaric chamber, pushed beyond its design depth. Acoustic sensors listen for the sound of cracks, a small ping that warns of structural fatigue. At 11,000 meters, the pressure is 1,100 atmospheres. That's like stacking 50 jumbo jets on top of the steel ball. To resist the pressure, it takes not only strength, but certainty, which is why Deep Sea Challenger was built with redundant safety margins, and why Cameron survived. Fast forward to the 18th of June 2023 in the North Atlantic at the wreck site of Titanic. 5 men board a submersible named Titan. Among them is Stockton Rush, CEO of OceanGate, the company that built the submersible. Unlike Deep Sea Challenger, Titan does not use a forged metal sphere. Its design is unconventional, a carbon fiber composite cylinder capped with titanium end domes. At 0900, the vessel starts its descent. The support ship gets intermittent text messages via a low bandwidth acoustic modem. There's no fiber optic tether. Communication is limited. At 10:47, contact is lost. The last message reports a routine descent at 3,346 meters, then silence. What happens next is sudden and final. The carbon fiber hull fails. Under 350 atmospheres of pressure, the composite layers delaminate and the fibers tear apart in a microsecond. The hull collapses inward at supersonic speed. The cabin volume is reduced to nothing in less than 20 milliseconds. The 5 men inside die instantly, their bodies destroyed before their nerves can fire. The implosion isn't an act of nature, it's a design failure. Engineers had warned that carbon fiber isn't suitable for repeated pressurization cycles. Unlike steel, which deforms predictably, composites can hide microfractures until they fail catastrophically. OceanGate ignored warnings, avoiding testing and classification by marine certification agencies, and marketed the design as innovation. In a 60 Minutes Australian interview, James Cameron has this to say.
But he came from the wrong industry. He came from from aeronautics. And aeronautical engineering is fundamentally different. You're going for lightness and strength, but you're not necessarily going for compressive strength. Your enemy, is all sorts of mechanical loadings, but it's not that squeezing, horrific pressure that you get at great depth in the ocean. And he chose the wrong materials and the wrong approach.
The US Coast Guard's 2025 report is blunt. Safety was misrepresented, testing inadequate, and known risks were dismissed. Cameron's steel sphere survived at 11,000 meters, where Titan's carbon fiber hull couldn't survive at just over 3,000 meters. Inside Deep Sea Challenger, Cameron could hear the steel groan faintly under pressure, but he trusted its integrity, its proven shape, its tested material, its certified design. Inside Titan, trust was misplaced. The men climbed inside a vessel that was basically built in someone's backyard. One system stood unbroken, the other failed without mercy. At these depths, there are no second chances. At 0830 on the 26th of March 2012, Cameron reaches the bottom of the Mariana Trench. He spends just 2 hours and 34 minutes exploring, cut short by the hydraulic leak. At 1100, he releases his drop weights and slowly Deep Sea Challenger begins to rise. The ascent isn't powered by thrusters. It depends entirely on buoyancy, on syntactic foam that floats even after a pressure-crushing dive, and steel weights that fall away when released. If they fail, Cameron will remain trapped on the seabed, alone at the deepest point of the ocean. Buoyancy is the difference between return and entombment. At 1100 inside Challenger Deep in the Mariana Trench, James Cameron sits at the bottom of the world. Through his viewport, streaked with hydraulic fluid, he looks out into the black water. The depth gauge reads 10,908 meters. The pressure outside is more than 1,000 times greater than at the surface. The mission must end. He's seen the seafloor, captured images, gathered samples, but the hydraulic leak has crippled the manipulator arm and the science door. This has limited his ability to collect samples of sediment, and the risk of staying longer grows by the minute. Cameron planned to spend 6 hours at the bottom, but because of the leak and resulting system failures, he starts his ascent after almost 3 hours. There's no engine to lift the Deep Sea Challenger. Thrusters alone can't fight the weight of 11,000 meters of water. To rise, Cameron must make his sub lighter than the water around it. And the solution is simple: jettison the ballast. Steel plates, about 500 kilograms of ballast weight, are held under the submersible by electromagnets. When Cameron throws the switch, the magnets cut out, the steel falls away, and the vessel becomes buoyant, slowly rising to the surface. It's the most crucial moment of the entire dive. If the ballast fails to release, the sub stays pinned at the bottom, with no thrusters strong enough to lift it, and no human rescue capable of reaching 11,000 meters down. Cameron would be sealed in the abyss until his air runs out. Submersibles live or die by buoyancy. Fixed buoyancy, like syntactic foam blocks made of resin embedded with hollow glass microspheres. This material doesn't compress under pressure, even at full ocean depth. It keeps the craft afloat without any ballast. Variable buoyancy uses drop weights. Heavy steel or lead blocks are held by mechanical clamps or electromagnets. When released, they fall away, instantly increasing buoyancy. Emergency redundancy is built into subs which carry multiple release systems like manual overrides, timed dissolving links, or explosive bolts. A jammed ballast system is a death sentence. For Cameron, redundancy was everything. If the ballast weight release system failed, a backup galvanic release was in place. The dissolving link is designed to corrode in salt water over a set period of time, allowing the sub to automatically surface. Multiple systems ensure that when he presses the release, at least one mechanism will function. That's why Deep Sea Challenger surfaced successfully after 7 hours. But history shows what happens when buoyancy fails. At 09:30 on the 29th of August 1973, off the coast of County Cork, Ireland, the small submersible Pisces 3 was completing undersea cable work. 2 men inside, Roger Mallinson and Roger Chapman, are nearly done with their job. The sub is being brought back to the surface to be hoisted onto its support ship. A tow line catches the aft hatch. The hatch seal opens slightly and water floods into the rear sphere. Within seconds, the sub's buoyancy is destroyed. The vessel plunges downward. Mallinson and Chapman feel the acceleration as the cabin plunges stern first into freefall. At nearly 40 meters per second, the sub rockets into the black. Inside, they act fast. Emergency systems jettison 400 pounds of lead ballast, but the flooding has already destabilized their buoyancy. The descent slows but doesn't stop until the hull slams into the seabed mud 480 meters below the surface. The impact is violent. Equipment bangs loose and lights go out, but the hull holds. Mallinson and Chapman are alive. Trapped, but alive. Buoyancy has caused their problem, but air becomes their enemy. Their system can sustain them for 64 hours. To prolong their air supply, instead of waiting every 40 minutes to turn on a lithium hydroxide carbon scrubber to soak up the carbon dioxide, they extend the waiting time for as long as they can. Then they feed in a small amount of oxygen from a cylinder. Despite all the proactive measures, they can't stop the clock from ticking. For 3 days, the world's navies race to save them. The Royal Navy mobilizes submersibles. The US Navy dispatches the Curve 3 remotely operated vehicle. Storm seas batter the rescue attempts, cables snap, lifts fail, and Chapman and Mallinson count down the hours in darkness, their air gauges slowly falling. By the 76th hour, their air is nearly gone. Carbon dioxide is rising and their hands shake from exhaustion and a lack of oxygen. Finally, Curve 3 places a cable onto Pisces 3. The crippled sub is hauled to the surface. At 13:17 on the 1st of September, the hatch is opened. Mallinson and Chapman stumble out alive. By managing their air supply, the Pisces 3 crew are able to stretch their air for 84 hours, surfacing with just 12 minutes of air left. Where Deep Sea Challenger's redundant ballast systems ensured a safe rise from 11,000 meters, Pisces 3 showed how fragile buoyancy can be. A single hatch breach stole its flotation. sent the vessel plummeting, and condemned its crew to 3 days of waiting with dwindling air. The system that seems simplest, weights and foam, was also the most unforgiving. As Cameron's Deep-Sea Challenger rises steadily from the Mariana Trench, the surface team track his ascent. Though the Deep-Sea Challenger is a fully untethered, autonomous craft, it relies on an onboard recording and an acoustic modem to communicate with the support vessel, providing some key telemetry: depth, oxygen levels, carbon dioxide levels, and battery status. Acoustic pings confirm his position every minute, but not every submersible is so well connected. In 2023, the 5 men in Titan lost their communication link. The silence above masked the implosion below. Navigation and communication, often treated as secondary systems, are in fact lifelines. The next system to examine is navigation and communication safety, and the consequences of its failure. By 12:15, James Cameron is rising slowly through the black water column. Above him, the support ship Mermaid Sapphire waits. Between them runs an invisible line of communication. The submersible uses an L3 Nautronics long-range acoustic modem. Acoustic modems transmit digital data, including environmental and system health information, from the sub to the surface. Depth, internal oxygen and carbon dioxide levels, battery status, confirmation of life support integrity, emergency status, and location can all be sent acoustically. Cameron can talk in real time with the surface, as well as send and receive short text messages, which are prioritized for essential operational and safety critical information. Telemetry is sent at intervals, generally every few minutes or on demand, with status reports and alarms transmitted as needed. Communication is never constant. Acoustic signals fade with distance, distortion, and noise. At depth, every message is fragile. The team on the surface watch his progress minute by minute. If something were to go wrong, they would know almost instantly. And knowing is everything. A submersible is blind without its invisible line of communication to the world above. Submersibles can't use GPS underwater. Radio waves don't transmit in seawater. Instead, they rely on 3 systems. For navigation, they use inertial sensors to track movement, a lot like your mobile phone. Doppler sonar measures drift over the seafloor, and acoustic positioning triangulates the vessel's coordinates. Communication relies on fiber optic tethers to carry live video and telemetry readings. Acoustic modems send pings and short data bursts through water. Some designs use both for redundancy. The support ship at the surface monitors every life support variable: oxygen, CO2, humidity, pressure, all mirrored on the support vessel screens. A sudden spike or silence triggers the alarm for a rescue scenario. Communication isn't a luxury, it's survival. Without it, the surface has no way to know if the crew is alive, where the sub lies, or how long its air will last. On the 18th of June 2023, in the North Atlantic, the submersible Titan descends with 5 men on board. There's no fiber optic tether, no high bandwidth link. Instead, communication is limited to a low-frequency acoustic modem, sending only short text messages and basic telemetry. The surface crew can send navigation instructions as a text to Titan, and Titan sends back regular status pings like location and basic system status about every 15 minutes. Positioning is imprecise and navigation is crude. At 9:45, routine updates are sent. Descent is steady. At 10:47, the final message is sent, and then there's silence. On the surface, the support ship waits. Minutes pass, then an hour. They're uncertain. Is it a malfunction or a delay? The only link they had is gone. They can't know the sub has already imploded. But James Cameron is certain.
Because you can't lose comms and tracking at the same time by any other means than a catastrophic event, because they're 2 separate systems. The comm system is one transducer that, you push to talk, or they were texting, I think, and the other one is a separate transducer that's independently powered, battery powered, internal, that sends out a passive signal and allows them to track the sub from the surface. You can't lose them both at the same time any other way but a catastrophic failure.
Titan's implosion is not a direct result of communication systems, but without robust communication, the crew is effectively blind. Search efforts are delayed, and it takes time for investigators to confirm the implosion happened at the very moment contact was lost. At 13:30, Cameron is still rising. The pressure eases, but the risk doesn't vanish. A jammed ballast release, a thruster failure, or a leak could halt him at any depth. On the surface, the team prepares for emergencies in the water and at the surface. But at maximum depth, Cameron's survival depends mostly on the sub's redundancy and his own life support reserves. Support vessels, remotely operated vehicles, and emergency divers are on standby. Months of preparation were dedicated to one outcome. If something went wrong, they could act immediately. But they can only act if Deep Sea Challenger is within the planned limits. The final life support system isn't inside the sub at all, it's rescue preparedness. And in some cases, it means the difference between survival and death. James Cameron's ascent is steady. He knows the truth. Once a sub leaves the surface, there's no turning back. If systems fail, the only thing standing between life and death is how prepared the crew are to execute a rescue. Although Deep Sea Challenger was backed by months of planning, National Geographic, the Woods Hole Oceanographic Institute, and Australian partners knew support vessels, ROVs, and emergency divers would be useless in this dive. But in a typical dive expedition or dive operation, every scenario has to be taken into account. Entanglement, communication loss, ballast failure, and rescue drills have to be rehearsed before a dive. If a submersible disappears beneath the waves, the search needs to begin immediately. And being ready is often the only deciding factor between survivors and casualties. Rescue comes down to a brutal equation: time versus air. Support ships must be equipped and ready to deploy recovery gear. ROVs can cut cables, attach lines, or free entangled submersibles. Manned rescue submersibles can dock with or raise a stricken vessel. And coordination between international navies, research organizations, and private contractors to combine assets is key to success. But all of these organizations and systems must act immediately. Every hour lost is air consumed, CO2 rising, and dwindling oxygen. The Johnson Sea Link was trapped in wreckage, 110 meters deep off the coast of Key West. Surface crews respond, but the sub is entangled in debris, and divers can't safely reach it quickly enough to save the 4 men trapped in the sub's 2 compartments. After more than 24 hours, 2 men are dead because they run out of oxygen before rescue could reach them. Roger Chapman and Roger Mallinson were trapped inside Pisces 3 on the seabed at 480 meters. The Royal Navy coordinated with the US and Canada. At the 76th hour, with only minutes of oxygen left, the sub was raised. Chapman and Mallinson survived by the narrowest possible margin. James Cameron in Deep Sea Challenger never needed its rescue plan, but the plan was there, tested, staffed, and ready. At 1500 on the 26th of March 2012, the green hull of Deep Sea Challenger breaks the surface of the Western Pacific. After nearly 7 hours submerged, Cameron opens the hatch. He's gone where only one other submersible has reached before, and he's done it alone. All of the life support systems and redundancies on board worked as intended. But in the case of Johnson Sea Link, poisoned air killed 2 men. In Titan, a flawed hull imploded, and Pisces 3 lost buoyancy, trapping 2 men for 76 hours. Each of these failures wrote the rules of survival. In the deep ocean, survival is tied to integral systems. When they work, we seldom hear about it. When they fail, they're never forgotten.